Good morning. I think that we're going to get started. It's 10 o'clock. Welcome to our Operations Committee. I'm going to open a committee. Our commissioners are here. And we're going to open a committee and get started with the feasibility study, Northwood Elementary School. Is everybody here? And I know I'm moving a little bit fast. Are you ready to present the people for Northwood? Who's here for Northwood?
Start with CIP.
Excuse me?
We're,
Oh, okay. Okay, we will hold the feasibility study for next, and let's start with the Capital Improvement Program, CIP. Thank you. How you doing this morning? Good morning. I got something to read for Ronald. Start off in your beginning to please, your name.
Sure. I am Dr. Nicole Stewart. I'm the Director of Facilities Planning and Real Estate. And so today we will be walking through our capital improvement program for funding year 2020 through 2025. So as you all are aware, our capital improvement program provides a 6-year plan to the state outlining what our capital needs are and provides a plan for how we intend to achieve our goals around our capital improvement program. So today we will go through just a few highlights around our previous CIP projects. We'll have an update on our major projects. We'll talk through our key goals for the 2020 CIP projects, and then we'll also go through our CIP requests and also walk through some of the additional information about CIP in terms of our HVAC supplemental funds, the change in state and local cost share, as well as progress towards our 5-year AC plan. So this slide just gives a summary of where our projects are from the last 3 CIP years. So for our FY19 projects, of those 22 projects, 21 of them are in design. Of the 29 FY18 projects, you can see that many of them are in various stages of design, procurement, construction, and we did have to rescind projects from FY18 because of the ongoing issues, well, the previous issues with partially funded projects. For FY17, of those 26 projects, 3 in procurement, 5 in construction, and then similarly, due to partial funding, we rescinded a number of FY17 projects. Our major projects, Halliburton and Graceland, they have begun construction, and building occupancy is still June 2020 for those 2 buildings. In addition, for the FY20 CIP, we are submitting Mary G. Faring for both planning and funding. And so we purchased 301 East Patapsco Avenue, which is a church site that you see in the photo there. And it's going to be an annex to Mary G. Faring to address the overcrowding for that building. And the current utilization is 206%.
One question.
Yes.
The church that we're getting is going to continue looking like a church when we finish?
So we are limited based on, I believe, the historical nature of the church. Right.
The outside will look very similar, but the inside will be, made.
Is this the first time we've ever done a church? Is this our first experience with a church?
City Neighbors isn't a church. Is
I'm
that
not
ours?
sure.
It's
Oh.
not ours,
Oh,
but good question.
Dr. Wash,
Yes, it's our first experience with the church.
okay.
It's an off-site building.
Oh, okay. It's interesting. Thank you.
Armistead Gardens, so Armistead Gardens, we've already gone through local planning, and of course, this is proposed to be renovation and addition. So this project cannot start until the two prior major projects are complete. The Graceland and Halliburton, and so the schedule is aligned to the completion of those two major projects. But we will be requesting funds for this project just to make sure that we have the funds that we need once we get started with construction.
Is it possible to share with us the costs associated with these projects, or is it in the PowerPoint?
Sure. So the total cost for Armistead is about $43 million. For Graceland and Halliburton, they are both approximately 31 total.
And so just to know for Armistead Garden, that is an estimate, because it's still in the planning analysis phase. And for Halliburton and Graceland, those are actuals because they've been out to bid. No, that's a
Right.
different
So
project.
that's Mary G. Faring. So that is a new major project that we're just submitting for planning and funding for FY19. So, Mary G. Faring, approximately 13 million.
So we've put money aside in the fund balance to help pay for that, so you'll see that in the budget. This is the overcrowding in that school really kind of got significantly worse over a fairly short period of time, and so we just didn't really have a lot of options. We've looked at things like rezoning for that school. We've looked at, it's a kind of isolated geographically school, so there's just not a lot of options. And so when this piece of property came up that's close to the school, we really felt like we didn't really have any other option, because I know some board members have, but if you visit that school, students really are incredibly in incredibly confined spaces for learning because it is so tight.
So, and just completely agree and appreciate that, but just in case the public only tuned in to hear the overcrowding is worse, it's a great thing that's happening at this great school in this community. It's another gem in our tool belt. So while we're talking about it in the challenges of occupation, it really is good principal, great school, and the families are coming and voting with their feet, and that's why we're overcrowded. So,
Thank you for correcting me. You're right that
yeah, and it wasn't a correction at all. It was just in
but
case
you're
somebody
right.
only half
it is.
listened.
That's right. It's this is an exciting thing. I think the principal is very excited to be able to have that expansion, and it's a nice facility. It needs a fair bit of work, but it will be a really nice space, and it'll be a great thing for that community.
I have a question, Commissioner Bodema. Is it more costly because of this being a historic site that we're renovating?
It is. We have to maintain some of the facility or some of the building, and so we're doing a renovation. It would not be as it is only 11 million, but it wouldn't be as expensive if it was new space. We are having to maintain some of the historic parts of the building.
Yeah, just to sort of pile on the good news, I just think it's great that the district was able to work creatively. Who would have thought that an adjacent church building would help solve overcrowding? And I know that this has been a project long in coming, and figuring out how to get site control and all that is not easy. So this is not a cookie cutter one, but I think it's an important one, and I think the staff has done a great job in getting us here.
So one more on Marie Faring. Are we considering working with City Council at all to change the access way so that alley could be converted to a green space between the two, or at minimum closed, so that when kids transition between the permanent school building that's there now and the church, that they don't have to deal with any kind of traffic?
I would have to follow back with that point. I don't remember that being a part of our discussion, but I definitely.
I think it would be a pretty unique opportunity to slow traffic in the neighborhood as well as keep traffic from cutting through the campus, and making a green space that currently doesn't exist for that school.
One more question, out of curiosity. How old is the church?
I would have to follow up. I don't remember that number
What
off
year
the
was
top of my
built?
head.
Would be interesting to know. Thank you.
And just to note for board members, the 102.4 document should have been uploaded with the presentation. So that will have all of the requests for FY20, and then all the amounts for projects. So our key goals for the year 2020, we are prioritizing, of course, the balance of major projects. That Graceland and those two Graceland and Halliburton projects are approximately $13 million. The local planning and funding for Mary G. Faring. We are requesting funds for year 3 of our 5-year air conditioning plan. Our year 1 projects are in construction, and then the year 2 projects are in design. We are also requesting, our key goal was also requesting funds for our unfunded projects from FY19. And so that is to keep consistency across CIPs to make sure the things that didn't get funded in the prior year continue to be requested in subsequent years. And then we also added a few projects, a few new projects, including roofs that are beyond their life cycle. So this is just a summary of all the requests for FY20 by project type. So we're requesting 37 projects, replacement, renovation, and new major projects. That represents 5 projects, and then of the systemic projects, AC and HVAC, 7, fire safety, 6, and so on.
Just a question, I guess, maybe for you, Allison. We talk about the 21st century schools, the $1 billion, and the 23 to 28 schools that would be funded under the 21st century program. But if I'm reading this right, there's another 5 schools, is that right, that are going to either be renovated substantially or some new construction?
So it's actually 4. So
4?
It's the Graceland, Halliburton, Marie G. Faring, and Armistead.
Because I think sometimes I'm not sure that the public makes a distinction, but it isn't 23 to 28 really. It's, you add another 4 to it because we're using other funds to build another 4 schools or modernizing another 4 schools. And I think it'd be useful for the public to understand that.
No, that's right, and even before the 21st Century Program, we did Waverly, we did Leith Walk, we've made Violetville. There's a number of schools that we've made major improvements to in recent years that are, some of them are pretty similar to the kind of improvements we're doing in the 21st century. So it's a good point, it's a good flag that there's a number of ways in which we're addressing the needs at our schools.
And we do include those when we go out and talk to, the state or the public about the CIP. We always mention our major projects, our prior major projects, and the ones that are going to be coming online.
Yeah, just not to belabor it, but no one necessarily understands what CIP is or major projects.
Sure.
People clearly understand 21st century schools, but from our standpoint, there's really virtually no difference in the fact that school kids are going to experience new or renovated schools just like those that are going to the 21st century. So we're building more schools than we're telling people, I think, sort of in one coherent way.
I would like to make a suggestion. This is not really a big deal. It's like a sidebar. You do an excellent job telling us how many, when, projects and renovations. Could you just do us a favor? And this is mainly for people who are observing on the TV.
Mm-hmm.
When you put down replacement, could you just name where you're going to do the replacement or which schools are going to be whatever? And when you do renovation, could you name the schools? Because when we're out there speaking to the community or visiting schools, it is really, really nice when we walk up to someone, a parent, and we say, well, this school is going to be renovated, and I don't want to be out there saying, we're going to replace this school, because sometimes we could be really off track. And this is only for our purpose and the public's purpose to see on the school. If they're sitting there listening right now, it would make them really happy to see the name of the school that's being renovated,
Certainly.
And that's, and you already know, so it's just a matter of putting it down, naming the location.
Certainly, and just for the public to make sure that they correlate the previous slides with this one. Halliburton and Graceland are the replacement projects. Armistead is the renovation project. And then the new major project is the Marie G. Faring.
And
To be clear on that one, that's just the addition on Marie G. Faring.
Yes.
The new building is
You-
not, there's no work happening on the existing
right,
building.
but as another column, just
Yes.
another column, you would put those names on the column, and it could be one sheet with the names of where we're going to be doing this. So like if we're going out, which we're going out to the different schools and meeting people, and I would like to have that one sheet and say, oh, this is the school that's going to be renovated or going to get a new roof or whatever. And you'll be adding it or changing it, I know, throughout. It's not gonna be consistent all the way through, because you'll make changes and as it's corrected, But it would be nice to have that one pager.
We can do that.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, so our total request for those 36 projects and then the one planning request is $82 million from the state. And so it's important to note that for this year, we did receive communication from the IEC about how much we're expected to receive in CIP funds. So we haven't had that previously. And so the communication indicated that we are expected to receive 29 million in state funds. And that is based on pretty much just what they funded us previously over the last 10 years. And so the note is that that might not include other sources, but right now we're starting from the position of they've indicated about 29 million is what we
And
might
and
receive.
is 29 million, is it clear that that's in new appropriation, or is that is new? Okay. What?
So yes, so that's what they indicated.
What?
I'm
Sorry, Frank was making faces behind you that, sorry.
They always count reverted funds, so I think that's a good thing to follow up on. They always count reverted funds.
So in the conversation that we had with the state, they indicated that they did not include any additional funds or any new money. They said that this was setting equity across the board. This is what the district had received on average over the past 10 years.
But again, that's because in the past 10 years, they have been increasingly taking resources away from us by recycling funds that were previously appropriated and then counting them again in the following year as new funds. And so to the tune of, as you know, we did our own analysis that we've lost $66 million. So I thought that in the real funds that we've received in the last few years, it's been more like 23, but you don't have to go back very far to when we used to get more like $36 million in new funds. And it's just in the last few years that they started reducing it by replacing it with reappropriated funds. So 29 is not really acceptable because that's a historical norm that has significant problems that we've pointed out to the state before and last year extensively when we testified before the state. So we'll have to follow up on that because that's not an equitable way. And also just one follow-up too is that it's really not the state's job just to provide equal funding to jurisdictions. This pot of money is like other pots of money where the bulk of capital dollars for LEAs comes from, for education comes from local dollars. And because in urban areas, you do not have the local property taxes to pay for that in the ways that more wealthier suburbs do, the state's job is supposed to make up that difference. And so providing equal funding across Maryland is not actually really providing the resources that Baltimore City should be getting.
And we did note that we felt that it wasn't taken in consideration some of the other challenges that we've had previously.
And they did not actually designate whether or not that would include recycled funds or not. They just really communicated this total amount that we can expect to receive that we still have questions about.
And it's also not the amount we received last year. Last year in new we received more like 40, right?
So it was new, and then there were additional funds. So there was the immediate threats funds that we received in addition. So they were new, yes.
But in like the more traditional pot of CIP last year, it was about 40 in new, wasn't it?
So that was about 25, and then we received about 12 on top of that from the additional funding.
Got it.
That was additional to the CIP.
I got
So
it,
they
okay.
came up with legislation to
Got it,
provide
okay.
funds for immediate buildings that are under immediate threat. And Baltimore received a pot of that
Got
money.
Can you explain this slide to me
Sure.
some more?
Yes.
I understand the colors.
Yes.
That makes sense to me, but like, are you saying that of the 82, we only have 29? Is that what you're saying?
So, so we've
Okay.
been using this slide for the past few years, really just to visualize what the challenge is in terms of our needs and not even our needs, our requests versus what we're expected to receive. So if you go from left to right, it's in order of how we've prioritized our projects for the year. So our major projects are at our highest priority, and so they total about 18 million. our request for AC projects represent about 8 million, and then that black line really is that $29 million mark. And so that essentially visualizes the challenge that we're not expected to, with the expected $29 million, we won't receive funding that enables us to do much more than those highest priorities, the major projects and the AC projects. So all of the FY19 projects from last year, projects that we had to rescind and resubmit, some of the new roofing projects that we have added to the CIP for this year, unless there are additional funds like there were last year, and if the state moves forward with that $29 million allocation, those are the projects that we won't be able to do.
Just following up on Commissioner Richardson's question, what I said before may not have been right, if I understand what you just said. So you presented to us a list of projects that preceded this slide. Do those project costs equal the amount that we anticipate getting, or is that $82 million of costs that you presented with the various projects, the four potentially?
So the 82 million represents the request for the 37 projects.
But so what I said earlier about that we should count in our list for newer renovated schools, 4 schools, the fact that we're only receiving a fraction of what we request means that we're not building and renovating those schools.
So on those major projects, we are requesting the balance. And so as an example, for Halliburton and Graceland, the total state funds is about $20 million, and we've received the bulk of those funds. So these are projects that we've been requesting. Major projects we do request over time. So these are projects that we've been requesting funds since FY16, FY17. And now for this year, FY20, we're requesting the balance of that, which represents that
The 18 million?
the 18 million plus the request for Armistead and Marie G. Fairing.
And then also the other thing is that for all of our major renovation projects, those are our top priorities. And so within our CIP, those are going to be the first ones that are going to get funded because these are our number one priorities.
Does the state have to honor those
So the
priorities?
state, generally, they do honor them. There may be some that they pick and choose, but for our major renovation projects, they tend to honor them. It's based on the amount that they actually allocate. So they may not allocate as much as we have requested for these projects.
But you see, part of the challenge is that the funding that we receive is so much less than the need. And keep in mind that the need request of 82 million these are many, correct me if I'm wrong, but many of these are near emergency needs. I mean, we just have to keep in the context that we have a $3 billion backlog on our buildings. So even the 82 million wouldn't meet the need. And so when we bring projects that we need to the state, they are projects that are often replacements of systems that are well beyond their lifespan, that are already broken, that are already malfunctioning. So, I mean, and then we only get a small fraction of that. And so to your point, Commissioner Frank, is the 18 million is in there, but you see how much it's eating up. It's eating up about 60% of the resources we have to build those schools. So we don't have very much left, and we have to keep replacing our buildings, as we saw with the 21st Century Initiative. Many of our buildings are in such poor shape in terms of the condition that it would be much cheaper to replace them than keep repairing them. So we have to keep feathering in some that we're replacing, but we don't, but over time it leaves very few resources to keep our buildings, repairs in our buildings that are much needed. So we include this slide to make clear to people, because there's often a kind of a narrative, well, you're getting all these money from the state, how come you haven't fixed the problem yet in terms of the conditions of our buildings? The resources that we receive in comparison to the resources that we need, there's just such an enormous gap between them that we will never catch up. We are using the resources we have as effectively as possible, and I think the team deserves huge credit for the way they've thought about organizing the work and prioritizing the work and doing our maintenance work and so on. So I think we've made huge progress, but the resources that we receive will never fully repair the problem.
And so this slide is just a map showing where the 37 projects are located. And so we've intersected the locations of those projects with our Community Conditions Index just to get an idea of the neighborhoods where these projects will be located. And so when we look at the distribution across low investment to high investment neighborhoods, we can see that the 37 projects requested, they're all well distributed across different neighborhoods in the city, and this is reflective of the CIP projects that have been funded over the past 10 years. So when we do that analysis, it looks very similar in terms of the distribution across communities.
This is so fundamental to what I guess we do here is building and renovating schools. So there's a lot of questions, but I know we want to get on to other things. Just one last question. If there is funding, as is shown here, for schools around the city, is there a formula that connects that funding with whether they might be disqualified for the next round of state and 21st century schools? So when we're making smaller are they Band-Aids that get them through the next couple of years, or by making investments in those schools, are they taken off the list of schools for potential 21st century round 2?
I would say that it's the first part. These are just system upgrades within buildings. Many times it may be a HVAC system, but you still have challenges with the roof and the windows. So I wouldn't say that it takes them off the list. If it was a major renovation where we were doing a multi-systemic project, I think that would take them off the list, but we don't have the resources and the funds in our CIP to do multi-systemic projects.
So our total request for FY20 is $101 million, including the $82 million from the state, and this year our allocation from the city is $19 million. If you recall, that amount between FY12 and FY18 had been $17 million. So starting last year, that did increase to $19 million. So I want to talk just a little bit about just the implications of state and local cost share and compare that to, the increase that I just talked about for the local allocation. And so last year we went through various conversations with the state and BPW around the state and local cost share. So this is something that is updated every 3 years. And so for FY19, we were, based on the formula, which includes things like wealth, enrollment, free and reduced price meals, outstanding debt, among other items, city schools was expected to receive a reduction essentially in the percentage of costs that the state will cover. So previously that split between state and local cost share was 93% and 7%. And so the BPW did hold that 93.7% split steady for FY19 with the understanding that in the next year that we would receive that 2% reduction. And so that is included in the FY20 amounts. And we'll go through an example of what that looks like. I will say that this hasn't yet been finalized, but this is what is expected to be voted on in October.
I'm guessing it's going to be further along, and I missed it. But when I was trying to figure this piece out, is it saying that the state share in dollars will stay the same, but the city's going to increase their input?
So no.
Or they're just a shift of balance with the same net total?
Right. So say,
Thank
for
you.
instance, if we have a hard cost.
I was really hoping it was the other way around.
Right. Say, for instance, we'll go through an example. We have hard costs of $100,000. And previously, the state would have covered $93,000. Now they're covering $91,000. So the balance of that, of course, our local dollars represent a match to our state funds. And so that means that our local funds would have to pay for more of the total project costs. And so in terms of what our local allocation pays for when we talk about a CIP project, so that 7% and now proposed 9%, I'm sorry. So that split represents the costs associated with our hard costs. And so that's important to understand, because once we start to add in contingency costs, A&E costs, construction management costs, and then other things that the district pays for in relation to various initiatives that make our project, that we need to do to make our projects happen, that local allocation is no longer 9%. You're getting into the 22% of the total project cost for a CIP project. So that's important to remember. Sometimes the 93.7, 91.9% split can be misleading because it doesn't take into account all of the other things our local allocation has to pay for our CIP projects. So this is just an example of what those impacts are. And so we just looked at Marie G. Faring, which is that new major project, and then our AC projects. And so we looked at what the total costs were, and then based on that previous 93.7% split, what the state funds would have been and the local funds. And then we also looked at it with the proposed change from 93 to 91 and calculated the difference. So just for these particular projects, that represents an increase of about $500,000 in increased local funds for these projects. And then if we look at the total requests across all 37 projects, that's a decrease in state funds by about $2 million. So when you think about it, so we did receive an increase in $2 million in local funds, but if we looked across the whole request for FY20, it's a decrease in state funds and an increase in local funds of $2 million.
Sorry, say that again. So it's a decrease in state funds of how
Yes.
much?
So if I look across the total requests, it's a decrease in $2 million from the state and an increase in $2 million that our local.
But
would
of
have
which
to cover.
$500,000 has to be spent just to make up this gap. So it's really only an increase of 1.5, is that right?
So the total across the whole request is $2 million. And so if I picked just the AC projects and our Marie G. Faring examples, that represents about $500,000 of that $2 million from the total request. So this is just, just a sample of projects of what that looks like when we just look at by project, what the implications are for the change in the state and local cost share.
Because I'm trying to follow your example in my
Yes.
head. So would it seem then that we're clearly not getting any additional money across the board, right? And would we still be able to do the things, because you have here FY19, FY20, would we still be able to do the same amount of projects given the funding levels that have changed on both sides?
So essentially, no. So if our local dollars represent a match to our state funding, since we are having to spend more local funds on projects, then that decreases our ability to be able to have funds to match to our allocation from the state.
Okay.
But also, your calculations are starting from the assumption that 29 million is the average. It's not starting from the fact that prior to the recent actions of really since the 21st century buildings passed, is when they started reducing the amount that we're getting in new appropriations.
So this just takes into account what the total project costs are for these projects. And so as an example, if I look at Marie G. Faring, where the total project cost is $13 million, if we use the formula, the 93%, 7% split, then the local funds that would need to go toward that project would be about $2.8 million. But now that we have a 91.9 split, the local funds are about $3.1 million. So that's about a $300,000 increase of local funds toward that project. And so then when we extrapolate that out to our total request of 37 projects, then that looks like $2 million.
Good question.
Okay,
So,
Commissioner Fry.
So, Dr. Stewart, I have to confess, I don't understand how this ratio works, so I don't want to take the time to do that, but let me ask two questions.
Yes.
One is, if you use the farming example, 13 million, I understand how the 93.7, when you do the math, breaks down that way. What I don't understand is, under the larger percentage for the city, of 9%, it increases the amount that we need to use from local funds towards this project. It decreases the state amount.
Yes.
Why are we not able to take that difference between the 10.1 million and the 9.8 million? Why is that difference not available to the district to use for other projects that are part of other ratios? Are we actually, I think the answer may be in an understanding of this ratio, which I don't understand, and again, I won't take the time now. But that's the question I have, is why does
So
it?
it's not that it can't. If you think about it holistically, so yes, you might have more funding, just on the basis that they're paying towards a fewer dollars towards a project. But again, so we have to have the local money to actually
Right.
match.
But if we get a certain amount of money from the state and a certain
Yes.
amount of money from the city, that's sort of a given. We apply for funds, and then we apply this ratio in terms of how each project is
Yes.
funded. Again, with the same pie. So if we're forced to spend more of local funds under the new ratio of 91.9, then we can use less state funds, or we have to use less state funds under that project, right, under that split. Why can't we use that state money that we're not now putting to that project, the $500,000, for other projects, so that the ratio works out in the end, so that we're not, I guess, you're looking like I don't know that I'm asking the question
I-
that makes
I
any
don't-
sense, but
Right.
I'm-
So we do, we can do, like, we get 30, let's say, we get about 35 million from the state, so that pot doesn't change. The bigger challenge is the funds that we have to match that 35 million. So now, we actually we have fewer dollars, because we're using more local money, we have fewer local dollars to match that 35 million. And so that's what brings down the number of projects.
I think I don't understand matching. I think that's what I don't understand. What's the match?
So our match would be, what is it, from the 91%. So we have to have a 9% match to every project. And then our local dollars also have to pay for the design fees, for the project management fees, and any contingency fees. And so now that increase from 7% to 9% means that we have fewer dollars to match all of these other projects, considering the fact that 9% is just to match the hard costs, but we also have other additional costs from our local
You're saying
money.
any project to which we apply state funding is subject to this split?
Exactly.
see.
We have to apply 9%, plus the additional design, project management, other fees.
I just have a comment. Early on, did you, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay, early on, I think that, and I'm beginning to understand a lot more than I did last year, because it's a process, and you gotta dig into it and stick with it. But I think that I don't know if we share enough information to the public about how this percentage works, and how we pay more, the percentages to how the state is giving us X amount of money, and we have to put the local funds, the percentage of local funds into the pot. And how, when we don't get, how it decreased, and I'm greatly concerned with, after I go to these meetings, I get greatly concerned that, and want to know if this is the same percentage, or are they going through the same process with the other districts? And it bothers me, because when I look at the numbers and I see how much is being given to other areas that have similar profiles we do, I'm greatly concerned about that. But I think that what you're giving us right now is really important, because I don't think people catch on to what's really going on with that money. Because when we have incidents like we had in the fall, and it was said that we returned X amount of money, people did not understand what was really going on. And what you just explained, you made it extremely clear. I think that we need to do better with our public relations and putting that word out, how our money, how we receive our money and how we spend our money. And I think that, I don't know how we would go about doing it, but we have to do that because somewhere along the line, when we get to the winter months and issues occur, we have to re-explain the same thing all over again. And you just explained it, so I don't know what it is we can do to prepare the public for the things that we're dealing with and how we have to make changes throughout. You get what I'm saying?
So just 2 points on that. So the formula that determines that our state-local cost share split will be 91 and 9%. So every LEA gets that same formula, but it's a different result based on the factors that go into the formula. So you have some LEAs that might have a 50-50 split, some that might have a 70-30 split. So it really depends on what the wealth and enrollment and the other factors look like for an LEA. The difference, of course, is we're getting $19 million from our local government for our CIP projects, whereas some of these other counties or LEAs are receiving $100 million. And so that's really what the difference is there. And then to your point about presenting this information for the public, and so the City Planning Office has been having conversations around equity around the city's CIP. And so we've been participating in those conversations, and for this year, they're actually doing a public session on September 24th at Fort Worthington. And so we will be participating in that, and that is a public meeting where the public can come and they'll get an overview of the city CIP and then information from different agencies around how we prioritize and what our funding looks like. I will say also that it is a very nuanced discussion around our CIP, what the dollar amounts look like, who's getting what. I do agree that we can do a better job of making that information public, which we do have a lot of that information internally that we use, but we can do some work around organizing it for the public.
Thank you.
One last follow-up.
Yes.
The driver behind the percentage change shift is the state?
Yes.
Is GDCI?
Yes.
Okay. And I only say that because in your first bullet point where you say Mayor Pugh voted, so she said, oh, the state's driving this, we're going to give an extra $2
So
million?
those are two different things.
Okay.
And they just happen to coincide at the same time. And so our state and local cost share is updated every 3 years. They're going to move to an update every 2 years, but that's something that would have happened regardless. And then the increase in the local allocation was from our own advocacy, going to the mayor and saying we've been receiving the same amount of local funds over the past 6 years.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
Thank you. In the interest of time, we're going
Yeah,
to move it
sure.
along a little bit faster. Thank you.
And did you want to do the update on the HVAC funds?
So we had an additional funds that were provided for HVAC. Delegate McIntosh was a key behind this money of $15 million over a 7-year period of time that allows us to do HVAC repairs and replacements of individual systems. We went to the state for a waiver, and it was granted. So the waiver basically allows us to have a project cost that may be less than $200,000. The waiver also allows us to pay for the funds with design fees, so we don't have to use our local dollars, and we also don't have to comply with the cost share. So we can do 100% of these costs. And so right now, we're reviewing and vetting the list. The waiver was granted a few weeks ago.
And then this is just an update on our air conditioning, our 5-year air conditioning plan. So for our school year 17-18, we completed 11, which was the first year of our AC plan. We completed 11 HVAC or AC projects in schools across the district. This year, we're working on 12 projects. Some of these counts do include air conditioning that's addressed by new 21st century buildings coming online, and you can see the breakout of those for the subsequent years. For 1920, that would be about 27 projects, AC, HVAC projects coming online, and then 16 and 10 in the subsequent year. So in total, the 5-year plan addresses air conditioning in 76 of our buildings in the district.
And so I just want to add that when we talk about HVAC, we're not talking about full systems, right? So most of our full systems would be costing us about 5 to 7 million, and now with the existing market, it's going all the way up to about 10 million for HVAC. We're talking about the vertical package units that we're going to be installing in our facilities.
So really quickly, just a request to tie this into procurement. So oftentimes when we procure a list of corporations that can be used for HVAC replacements, but we never hear who then was actually granted the award of the contract. Would it be possible to get an appendix to this presentation for the 17, 18, and 18, 19 that are in progress? Here's the companies that were originally on the, and I'm missing the word when we. Eligible, yeah. Here's the eligibles, and here was how they were applied.
And so because of the cost of it, we don't have our on-call requirements contracts. That's not what we use here. We still have to put these out to bid.
Okay.
We've been having conversations, discussions about bulk purchasing of the individual unit and equipment. But because of the cost of the construction, it goes over our dollar limit. We still have to put these out.
So these
to
are
bid.
never from on-call?
No.
Okay, thank you.
And just to note, in the quarterly report that gets updated to our website on CIP projects, that does list the design and construction firms for all of the CIP projects. Sure. So this is just an update on the school safety program. The gist here is that school safety grant program from the state, and so our potential allocation is $1 million, and we're still having discussions about the projects that we will submit for the state's school safety grant program. And then this is just a reminder of some of the legislative changes, the prior legislative changes from last year around our CIP, including the change to an interagency commission. The BPW no longer votes on our request and things of that nature. And so this is then the decision points in time. So we'll get, we submit this in October, and then by next June, we'll know what the total allocation will be. And that is all.
Thank you so much.
One quick question.
Oh, one quick question.
Sorry.
Okay.
What is the formula that determines how much the state is going to give us in capital funds? Does it involve wealth?
And that has been the challenge. There is no formula. And this year, there was the question of why we received an expected allocation, which we've never received before. And that expected was 29 million. And their basis was equity across the board. This is what you've been getting for the last 10 years. So there is no formula that considers wealth and a number of other different things.
29 is what we've been getting?
29 is not what we've been getting.
Well, 29 is their estimation of what we've been getting, but again, remember, that includes the way they've been recycling funds for the
Right.
last several years, so it's an artificially low number, even
Right.
if it is the right estimate, which you're saying maybe
Right,
it's
thank
not,
you.
but even if it were, it's an artificially low number, because it includes recycling funds, or they've been recycling funds when they should not have been, so prior to recent years, the number was more like 36, 37 million. And, yeah, I think there are questions about whether there should be some formula that's more distributing resources based on need, that would make that number too low, even the 36 million number.
Good morning, Commissioners. Northwood Elementary School is the 27th feasibility study to come before you. You can, where's the, oh, thank you. Let me just get that the right direction. There we go. Sorry, that's a little difficult to read. Wilford is to the north of the project. It's on York Road, and then to the south is Hartsdale. One of the challenges with this site is that it's a very busy road, York, and so right now the access to the site is off of that very busy street. Wilford is really quite narrow and has parking on both sides. Hartsdale is the quieter of the streets surrounding the property. It's about 15 acres as well. We chose a replacement school. You can see in the black outlines in the northwest corner of the site the existing school. And then to the east, you'll see another rectangular box. That's a modular that will be removed. And then in gold, you see the proposed new school. This allows us to swing in place so that the students do not need to leave the site. They can stay in their existing building while the new building is being built. This allows also access to the building from Hartsdale, which is the quieter street, as I mentioned earlier. The net green space, plus or minus, is about even. Once you remove the existing buildings and the modular and add the new school in, you're not really losing green space on the property. Again, these are, can they be increased in size? I'm not sure you can really see those very, very easily. Thank you. So what you see here is that the big box spaces are clustered to the right, and then to the left are your academic wings. This allows us to have community access to the gym, the dining, and then community space per se, without actually having to, while allowing us to close off the academic wing. And I think there was a question potentially about the loss of the auditorium here. State dollars do not allow us to rebuild an auditorium if it's lost in a replacement school. So they want more flexible space, which is why we put in what we call a cafetorium, which is the cafeteria space with a stage. And why we use such flexible seating, we have tended to get the seating that has the table with the attached chairs, but very easily convertible to a bench seat with back. And it's the same piece of furniture. It's very easy to do, and allows you to then have a complete almost an auditorium setting, so that the seating is there for that, and then also converts right back.
Like, did you get the list of the 3 questions that Commissioner McFadden, did you get that list?
I got them this morning.
Oh, you did?
And I know that
And-
the one was about the auditorium for Northwood.
Okay, can I give me one, because I want to respect the fact that he sent it early, and
Yes.
you already answering most of the questions, so just let me read his questions so I
Yes.
make sure that you, and his questions were, there is no auditorium in the third option of the
Yes, ma'am.
Northwood feasibility study. Is the plan for fully functioning multipurpose space with a stage and adequate production and amenities? If not, are we able to consider the addition of an auditorium to that study option? You kind of answering some of this. With all of that field space and the rec center being on site, it would be nice to see an amphitheater on that site. So you answered some of those questions
So
already.
you're referring to potentially we do an outdoor theater
Okay,
of
right.
some sort. It's certainly, we do try to get outdoor learning spaces, and so sometimes they take the form of an amphitheater type arrangement. So that would certainly be a consideration for this site, considering that the topo lends itself to that. So that would be certainly possible.
Okay.
There is the rec center, as you mentioned, on site. If you pull back a little bit on the, you'll see the rec center is in the northern, pretty much the center of the site there. So that remains untouched. And so the rec center would still be fully functional, and then you'd have the new school. And then on the second level, again, just having the remaining grades. We're looking at the first level here. This is the first floor plan. Second level plan, again, just has, some of the big box spaces are 1.5 stories to 2 stories, and then the academic wing, you have your second level of the academic wing. And then there is a third floor, a partial third floor. An entire, complete third floor was not required for the student, what is anticipated as the.
Could you speak a little louder on this side? I don't know what it is, but I can't, I
Sorry,
can't
when
hear
I'm
you
looking
well.
away, I think my voice is not directed at the mic. Oh, okay. So the third floor, a complete third floor is not necessary to meet the expected SRC for the property. Or for the school, I should say. And then just some elevations, looking at the school, some of it being, again, 2-story, and then the academic wing being 3-story. But plenty of space here to lay out the school and still preserve all of the green space on the site. Were there other questions? I'm sorry that I did not see those yesterday.
But I'm not, he gave slide numbers, but I don't see slide numbers. But if you don't mind, I'll just give you the questions, and as we move through it, you know, you can get to it or whatever.
Mhm.
Second question was the CIP update, slide 15. That's all the 20.
I don't think that was my presentation. I think that was the presentation you just had. The CIP update would be different than the feasibility study. So I think the only question for me was on the auditorium. That's okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
So just a quick question, not to drag us down a big, huge rabbit hole, but how are we addressing restrooms in the building to make sure that there's equitable spaces for students who may identify as non-binary?
So there is consideration given to that, and maybe Nicole can help me use the correct terminology, but
Good afternoon, Nicole Price, Director of Community Public Relations. The design team looked at and explored options for restrooms that would be labeled all, so that students who do not identify with a particular sex, they would use that bathroom, and that was an individual bathroom. Those are not included in the early schools, as the conversation started once those projects were well underway, but they started just before the year 2 schools.
So that would be included in this plan, we just can't see it labeled?
Well, we wouldn't have that much detail just yet, but I don't know which schools it's included in, and we will have to get back to you on specifically which schools, if any, that they will be included in. But they started exploring that to make sure that we were in compliance with, I forgot the federal regulation. I was looking at Lynette.
With law?
Yes, with law.
It would be great at the next 21st Century update, at the quarterly update, to get that information included. Which
Absolutely.
schools have accommodating restrooms, which ones don't.
okay. We
Thank
can
you.
provide that, absolutely. Any other questions? Thank you.
Very much. Is that it?
We're going to stay for the quarterly update.
Okay, wonderful. Wait, you have another question?
No, but does Lynette need to come up to the front? Are you,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, I was gonna invite her up. Okay. Okay, next we're gonna talk about, oh, I see what you're saying.
Yep.
The 21st Century School Buildings Program Quarterly Update. Okay.
The restroom information, not in this quarterly update.
No, but we will get that to you separately. How's that? I'm going to have Nicole start on this one, please, and I will chime in as I need to.
The clicker. So we'll go over the status of year 1, 2 schools, 21st Century Learning, local hiring, internships, swing space, transportation, year 2 groundbreaking, and then the schools that open this school year. That seems like an awful long agenda. It is my pleasure to report that we now have 9 schools open under 21st Century School Building Program. The ones highlighted in the darker green are all the schools that opened either between September 2017 and September 2018, so this school year. The remaining year 2 schools are the 2 at the bottom, Arlington Elementary School, which is now under construction, and Patterson Claremont Building, which we're still, it is still labeled as TBD, but we are hopeful that it will be moving along soon. For the year 2 schools, Fairmont Harford, for the last quarterly update, was under construction. It is still under construction. We do expect it to open in September 2019, so it is currently on track. John Rohr, during the last update, it was under John Roa, Baybrook, and Calvin Rotwell were all in construction documents during the last update. They're now all under construction. If you drive by any of them, you should see the construction fences up. Those schools are scheduled to open in January 2020.
Can I make a comment real quick? I like these slides. I do. Because, I mean, I can carry it with me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, the names of what they're doing, this and when it will be completed. This is really, I like that. It's fabulous. I just want to, before we move on.
Thanks. Mary E. Rodman, the last update was in concept. We're now in design development. That school is one of the few schools that hasn't started construction yet, but the students were relocated to Swing Space, primarily because construction will start mid-year, and as a part of the program, we do not like to relocate students in the middle of the school year. Hartford Heights now have an A&E and CM selection. Commodore John Rogers in Highlandtown 237, pending approval of our MOU partners. The board has already approved those projects. And the remaining schools, Govans, Medfield, and Walter P. Carter were all in concept during the last presentation. The top two, Govans and Medfield, are now in schematic, and Walter P. Carter are in design development. Those schools are scheduled to open in January 2021. Cross Country is going through EA and CM selection and is scheduled to open in September 2021. Montebello, Robert Coleman, Northwood were all in feasibility study during the last presentation. I guess I should have done those together. Montebello and Northwood were all in feasibility study during the last presentation. Those feasibility studies for Montebello and Northwood are being finalized now. Robert Coleman's is pending approval of our MOU partner. You just heard Northwood. Scheduled to open September 2021 for Montebello, September 2021 for Robert Coleman, and Northwood January 2022. Calverton and James Mosier the A&E has been selected for Calverton and pending approval for James Mosier of the feasibility study, and those two schools are scheduled to be open in January 2021. However, that will probably change because of the grade configuration changes being made to Calverton and James Mosier. As you know, Calverton will become grades 3 to 8, and James Mosier will become a pre-K to second, so the second set of schools to open with those grade configurations. The 21st Century Buildings Project is more than about facilities. So Don Shively, Director of Academic of 21st Century Learning, works with all of the schools to do to identify a academic focus, to make sure staff are trained. And so for each of the new schools as they open, there's a staff person assigned, or actually a consultant assigned to those schools to ensure that they learn and know how to use technology, and that person stays with them for the first 6 months after the school opening. For the course of the schools that just opened, there was project-based learning training, STEM technology training, using technology to engage learners in differentiated instruction, and 3D printing training. All of the schools that have opened have selected an academic focus. Frederick is the only one which is different because it is a charter school, so direct instruction and core knowledge as a charter school under the Baltimore Curriculum Project. Fort Worthington is a project-based learning and restorative practice school. Lyndhurst, or now Wildwood Elementary Middle School, is STEM. Dorothy I. Heights is arts, integration, and restorative practice. Forest Park, STEAM. Arundel and Cherry Hill both are STEAM and restorative practices schools. Pimlico, project-based learning. Academy for Career and College Exploration is to be determined since they are one of the new 6 schools. And then Independence is a charter school, so the charter schools don't go through the same process. For local hiring, many of the projects have exceeded their goal. Total local hires were 259. Total new local hires for active schools. Those are the schools that are just completed construction. So the Pimlico Forest Park was 173. And 33% of the spending thus far has taken place through minority and women-owned businesses. I won't go through all the numbers for each of the individual projects, but those are there for your review. We're happy to report that over the summer we had 6 youth work students with us We had two separate sessions. For the first or the regular session, we had 2 youth work students, and for the second session, we had an additional 4 students. Those students helped us to increase communication with parents, particularly of students that were transitioning. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson closing to make sure parents knew that if students were in pre-K to second, they were going to Arundel. If they went 3 to 8, they were going to Cherry Hill. And so they called, they made over 5,000 or close to 5,000 calls to parents of students that were experiencing any type of transition, moving to a new school building, moving to swing space, particularly focused for those schools that would be receiving yellow bus transportation. And out of the 6 students, we hired 2 of our youth work students who will be with us for the entire school year.
You move it to the next slide. Okay, slide 10. Let me ask the question that Commissioner McFadden sent, and then I know you're going to cover it, and so I won't have to go over the question after you present the slides. And he's saying that the 21st Century Buildings update. He said, I visited Murray Rodman Elementary School this past Monday. In speaking with the principal, he is paying approximately $20,000 out of his school funds to cover the cost of after-school activity transportation. Apparently, the transportation provided with the 21st Century Plan does not cover after-school programming. This is concerning as the school has lost students enrollment due to the swing space move. The school has shown some of the highest gains in the PAR scores, and the principal attributes a lot of that growth to the enrichment opportunity and extracurricular supports provided to the school community. Is there any way to address this without the funds coming from the school budget? This is a high-need school, and ideally, the majority of school funds should go directly to instructional programming, professional development, academic supports. So I wanted to give that to you in the beginning.
And so one of the challenges that we have are the number of buses. And so for an after-school program, that would mean that the buses would have had to make their full rounds to pick up other schools and then to come back for the schools for after-school programming. A lot of times, after-school program buses are provided for students that have specifically in their IEP that they're required to take a particular program. And so for this case, the district just doesn't have a large number of buses in order to accommodate.
Thank you.
Okay. So yellow bus transportation is provided to students when they are relocated to an alternate location. This year, we are providing yellow bus service to over 2,000 students at 37 stops and 42 buses throughout all of the swing space schools. And in order to support students, so oftentimes when you're moving a school for the first time, the entire school, it is quite confusing to parents, and students experience a lot of anxiety. So in order to help relieve that anxiety and ensure students are safe, we try to recruit district staff to make sure that all of the bus stops are covered. And this year we recruited actually over 100 students when we did the final count, over 100, district staff that would go out in the morning and afternoon when students were gathering at the stop, and in the afternoon when they were returning home to make sure students were safe, to relieve and answer parent questions. So oftentimes what happens is that first week in particular, some of our younger babies will get on the wrong bus. And one of the ways we assure parents is even if your child gets on the wrong bus, there is a district staff at a stop to receive your child, and then they're communicating with us here, central office, where the child is, and then we make sure that we work to get them back to their parents and their right stop as quickly as possible. Follow up with the school so they know which bus that child should be on the next day, and make sure they get off at the right stop. So that was quite successful this school year, and it was the largest number of volunteers we had to recruit. It was the largest number of students we've moved, and the largest number of buses. We went from only needing 14 buses to 42 buses this year. And just to clarify what Lynette said, Mary E. Rodman buses are linked to Calverton buses. So when they pick up Mary Rodman in the morning, they drop them off at their school. They then go pick up Calverton students and drop them off at Calverton. And the same thing in the afternoon. They pick up Mary Rodman students in the afternoon, drop them off to their respective stops, and then pick up Calverton students. So because the buses are linked, it is difficult to provide buses for after-school programming. In previous years, we did work with the Family League to identify additional funds to provide transportation for after-school programming. However, those funds were not available this year to be able to do that for all 5 schools that moved into swing space. And then the last two, as you know, on July 26th, we celebrated the groundbreaking of 5 additional schools: Calvin Rodwell, Fairmont Harford, Arlington, John Rua, and Baybrook. And this summer was obviously historic with 5 schools going under construction and 5 schools opening. And the 5 schools that opened were Arundel, Cherry Hill, Pimlico, Forest Park, and the Robert Poole Building, which houses ACE and Independence. For the next quarterly update, we'll make sure to get the information that you requested, Commissioner Hassan. And we are currently doing a deep dive in our process, looking at concerns that we've heard and making some revisions to our process to increase communication and engagement with families. And so in the next quarterly update, you will be able to hear some of the concerns that have been raised with our office and how we're addressing those challenges.
Any questions, commissioners?
Nice work.
Okay, thank you. That was excellent. I enjoyed the day. Thank you.
Adjourned at 11:11 a.m.